Hello everyone, this is Scott Lowe from CES 2014. I am sitting here with John Kohler, the VP of Marketing for PlayStation. John, you introduced something kind of important today.
We did.
PlayStation Now.
In our keynote, we talked about PlayStation Now, which is, I think, what a lot of people were asking for after E3. What does Gaikai turn into? Yeah,
I mean, obviously we saw a little taste of it with Remote Play on the PlayStation 4, but this is really kind of the full realization of what Gaikai is all about. You know, access to games on devices that aren't necessarily intended for games. And I think one of the things that was most surprising to me was specifically the fact that you guys are planning on bringing this to not just like PlayStation devices. I mean, I think a lot of the assumption was that it was going to be PS3 to PS4, but it's actually going way broader than that.
Yeah, I know the market expectation was this would be PlayStation only. It will be very strong with PlayStation platforms, so PS3, PS4, and Vita. We talked about that today. But I think philosophically, we looked at this as a bigger opportunity and making this much more of an open platform. So extending the gameplay experiences beyond just PlayStation to Bravia TV and eventually to tablets and smartphones. I know that's something that a lot of people are surprised with, something that maybe they think is not PlayStation-like. But in our sense, we said philosophically we need to kind of look at this in a bigger sense. There's other places to be able to play games, and PlayStation Now really provides that.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously the long legacy of consoles and even the PlayStation in general, like the PlayStation platform, has very much been tied to proprietary hardware and very much those devices that are designed specifically for that. But it makes a ton of sense, to extend it to something like a Bravia TV. But looking into mobile, like how do you guys feel like you can kind of transfer that experience to something that is not intended for gaming in that way?
It's really about the control and about the way that we can distribute the content. So both of those things are important. But the number one goal that we had with PlayStation Now, and one thing that we've been trying to emphasize overall, we're trying to solve what I think is maybe the number one or number two biggest issue in this industry, and that's immediacy. We've got to solve that. And that's something, getting people into games quicker is really our goal. If you notice, obviously tablets, smartphones have a really quick way to play. Now they're smaller, short-form games. Something like PlayStation Now is very quick, very immediate, low latency. I think you got to play it earlier. And it allows you to jump into the gameplay experience so fast. On tablet, on smartphone, on Bravia, and also on our PlayStation platforms. That's a big, big thing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that requires a tremendous amount of infrastructure. And, we've heard that the minimum or the recommended latency is about, 5 megabits per second, or sorry, the connection quality. But, is that something you're specifically targeting for United States specifically for now? Is it something kind of more broadly North America? And more importantly, can we see that expand kind of more globally?
Yeah, so to put a finer point, recommended rate is 5 megabits a second. I mean, that's not a floor. That's just saying that's our recommendation to get the kind of low latency experience you guys are getting to experience here today. But in terms of scale, we have viewed the U.S. as a priority market for gaming overall for some time. And I think you saw that. We launched PS4 here first, and that was really an indication of the fact that we think this is very important. U.S. and Canada will launch PlayStation Now first. We talked about summer. And then we want to look at other territories. And so we'll scale it from where we are here, and then we'll see where that goes across the world. But really making it work here, seeing the consumer acceptance. We're going to have a beta here in a few weeks that starts at the end of January to really show, and for us to get a sense for what's consumer reaction, what things do we need to work on, what kinds of game experiences do people want, and then look at how that scales over time to other countries.
And obviously the emphasis right now is on PS3, and I'm assuming we can assume PS2, maybe PS1 at some time in the future in terms of bringing that content to these platforms. But more specifically, when you look at someone like a PlayStation 3 user, what's the benefit of Gaikai for them? Obviously backwards compatibility for PS4, but what about those native experiences on PS3 for Gaikai?
For someone that owns a PS3 today. So it's really the breadth of the content. And I think, you look at the scale of content available for PS3, it's pretty staggering. There's a lot of games, in, let's call it from 06 to 09, that aren't on shelves anymore at store. And maybe aren't kind of the thought process that's something you buy through download, but are great games. I mean, you're looking at, God of War as an example. Like some of the games, Little Big Planet, like these games from back, a couple years ago, that either can be kind of brought back into the vernacular or experienced for the first time. So for a PS3 consumer, I think that's pretty huge. But also for a PS4 consumer, someone who just bought a PS4, there's been a lot of talk, there's no PS3 backwards compatibility. This is not the answer to backwards compatibility, but it does allow you to have the engagement with a great lineup of titles that maybe you didn't get to experience in the PS3.
So obviously you haven't talked a whole lot about content. We've seen a selection of titles here. I mean, and you mentioned that there's this huge back catalog of amazing titles that other people have maybe not had a chance to play. Are you guys shooting for that kind of comprehensiveness in terms of like potentially even capturing the entirety of the PS3 catalog, or is it going to be a little more selective at times?
Well, we'd like scale. I think that we'd like to get as much as we can to be playable for PlayStation Now. We need to test them. Yeah. So, I mean, part of this beta process is going to be doing that and seeing what works best. But also, I think when we look at the type of consumer that's coming in that's interested in PlayStation Now, and we think it's quite a few different types of consumers, quite a few different types of segments, but we've got to look at what types of games they want to play.
Yeah.
So during this beta process, we'll go through this and see what are the exact types of games that they want to play, what kind of genres they want to play. And then we'll test them and try to bring them to the market.
Excellent, excellent. So how are you gathering feedback? Is there going to be some sort of method within the beta program? Like, could you tell us a little more about the beta program and your plans for that?
It's a closed beta, okay. So there's still a lot to be discussed in terms of how we can bring people into that. I know a lot of people are interested. But in terms of how we're getting the back-end analytics, there is going to be ways that we do that. We haven't made that public, but we're going to be looking at really engagement levels and you know, I think there's going to be obviously some qual and quant that play into this outside of the beta as well. There's a lot of efforts within the PlayStation offices across the world to make this a very successful reality. And I think what you saw here today is really the work of the team over the last few years to bring a real low latency, seamless, immediate gameplay experience.
Yeah, I've mentioned a few times to people, like the fact that you can play it on convention connectivity, where which is notoriously bad at a hotel, and it works so well. It's really, really impressive.
And I think that's one thing there's been over time. Maybe even after E3 last year, people said, well, you got to show this to me. Like, I'm not sure I'm getting it. Now you can see it for real. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking ahead to summer, when you more formal rollout to other PlayStation users, is this something we can expect to see in waves? Is it going to be kind of all at once, or are you not saying quite yet?
In terms of the rollout, scale, the territory rollout, we haven't said that quite yet. I mean, we're focusing on US and Canada, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Sure. For all things PlayStation at CES, head over to IGN.com/CES.